Today, we're going to talk about what generational curses are you facing?
Being able to evolve and grow and realize you're never in a place where you're perfect, right?
Right,
You always
right.
have some things that you can definitely, work on and make better.
I did research on that's not a healthy way to be in a relationship if people are screaming at each other. So, like, I was stuck at a crossroads of who I am and what's best for you and I. Welcome to the 1024, where we talk about love, finance, and everything in between. We're your hosts, Brian.
And Dr. Sam.
And today we're going to talk about what generational curses are you facing?
So I will start. One of the things that I wanted to be cognizant of when I started this relationship was the generational curse of my family not showing love and affection. I knew that that was something I needed to work on within this relationship. So I went to therapy. Also, I happen to have a partner who is all about love and affection and kind of forced me.
Oh, wow. That's high praise. I thought you were going to say I have a partner that's like nearly psychotic.
Well, that too. But had someone that pushed me to that side of being extremely or overly affectionate.
Oh, okay. So it's funny that you say that, because I think what you're referring to with overly affectionate is my love language is
Baseline.
personal touch. So it was funny when we first started dating. I guess that's something that you weren't used to.
No.
Was personal touch at all.
No.
And I'm just like touch you all over no matter what.
Yep.
Not on the first date, but you know what I mean, right?
Actually, on the first date.
Okay, so like I just remember us going into Walmart and me putting my arm around you and then you looking like, what the hell is this? And later on you tell me like, yeah, like that was definitely uncomfortable and a different situation than what I'm used to. And I was like, really? I didn't really even think about doing that. Like it's like comes so natural for me, and it's complete opposite from how you grew up.
Yeah, our family, we didn't hug each other, we didn't touch each other. It was just very like, you don't even say I love you. It wasn't until I think very recently in therapy, one of the things that I remember specifically telling my therapist, like, there's going to come a point in time where this man is going to say I love you, and I'm almost 100% positive I'm going to respond by saying thank you. And she was like, all right, we need to start working on this like immediately, because what if he pops up and says I love you tomorrow? What are you going to say? I was like,
thanks.
I'll probably laugh, or like one of my other defense mechanisms, but I won't say I love you back. So it definitely, I needed to be coached even to say those words.
So wait, so like if you weren't at therapy when we first started dating and I said I love you, you would have just said thank you.
I would have laughed or said thank you. Yeah.
Okay. And then there would have been like an awkward silence.
That was definitely awkward.
And I would have just been staring at you. I've been staring you down.
Yeah.
And then what?
Then I would have patted you on the back. I'm like, all right then. What's up, Nate?
Oh my God. So, and that's hilarious because like I would have also been like, well, how do you feel? Tell me how you feel.
And then I think I would have overly elaborated. Like, there are so many things about your personality that I enjoy, or like I would have told you all the other things than stating I love you. I would have said so many other things, and it would just been so hard for me.
Yeah, and I'm like, but do you love me though?
I'm like, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm means what?
Mm-hmm means yes.
So you do love me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, if you love me, then just say it then. Use your words, not your affirmations. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like I remember when I had the conversation with my therapist, and she's like, you need to practice with people because this is not gonna end up gonna be well.
You shouldn't have told me that.
Why?
Because now I'm just like picturing you like telling any random guy I love you. Like, I love you. And I was like, is that real?
No, I was talking about when I was dating you.
Well, you practice with other men?
No, I practiced with my mom.
You practice I love you with your mom?
Yeah, because me and my mom don't say I love you. And she's like, you need to find one person, either it's going to be a friend or even a family member that you're going to say I love you to. So it's like when you hang up the phone call one of your family members and say I love you. And I called first, I think I called Alfred.
Yeah.
And he was like, I love you too. And I was like,
oh shit.
And then
wow.
I called my mom and I was like, she wanted to have a whole conversation about something. And I was like, all right, I just was calling to tell you I love you. She's like, oh, I love you too, Sam. And I was like,
wow. I'm so surprised because you said like the way that you grew up, no one in your
Right.
family said I love you until you initiated I love you.
Right. But like I always tell you, my mom grew up in the lovey-dovey family and converted over to the stern, non-loving family when she got married. But my mom is used to that. Like, but she toned it down.
Yeah.
And then became used to us not doing any type of affection and love. She told me she was very happy to hear me say it because she wanted to be like that. But obviously, you know.
Yeah, but like, what about your brother though? Like, he didn't grow up with that.
No, Alfred is very.
Was it awkward when you said it to him?
Yeah, it was awkward.
Was it?
Yeah, it was awkward when I said it to my mom, and it was awkward when I said it to Alfred.
Oh, wow. Like, did you have to keep saying it over and over to them for it to get not awkward? Or was it just like, okay, fuck this. I'm just going to go ahead and man up and say I love you to him?
That's how I did it. I was just like, I'm just going to say I love you. Manny, it was very easy to say I love you to Manny because I've been saying I love you to him since he was a baby. That isn't awkward for Manny to hear from me. I don't know if if our parents tell him that often, but like when he was growing up, I remember constantly telling him that. And I think maybe at that point was when I realized, oh, maybe our family is a little fucked up and I need to make sure that this child isn't experiencing the same things we experience.
Yeah, I think that's important. It's interesting though, because it's like on one end of the spectrum, it's like your mom and your dad got together and then your mom kind of lost herself in the relationship and then losing herself affected her children. You know what I mean? But then when you decided to go to therapy, the therapist suggested that you talk to your mom and your brother and just say it, right? So like internally, I know that obviously it was awkward at first, but then like, what did that do inside of you? Did that give you more courage? Did that create more anxiety? What end of the spectrum did you fall on after you started saying it and you started like normalizing that?
I think initially after that conversation, so I did it all in the same day because I was like, I'm just going to go ahead and get this over with.
Just rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah. So I did my brother and my mom like in the span of like 10 minutes or whatever.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Like I expected my mom to be awkward about it. Alfred, I know he's always going to be like, oh, I love Alfred texts I love you sometimes. Like he's done that. But I knew my mom, she might put love you in a card or something, but I can't say like the last time I verbally heard her say those words. So I was like, oh, this is going to be awkward for her. But then she was like, oh, I love you so much, Sam. I love you. I love you. I love you. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. It's
wow. Also, what's interesting about that is for myself, growing up, I did not want to be told I love you.
You're weird. Go ahead.
No, but that's what's interesting about it is because that specific thing I would not have needed at all. I actually wanted the opposite. Like, I don't want you to tell me that. I'm good. However, hugs, I would have wanted, right? I would have wanted hugs. I would have wanted like a pat on the back. I was like, good job, like that kind of thing. I would have wanted that.
So if you told me I loved you and I patted you on the back, that would have been good?
In a way.
Oh, shit. Okay.
And if I could tell that like the reason you weren't saying it is because you had to think about it first. And then you're like, I really care about you and you rub my back or something like that.
That would have been equivalent.
And I'm like, I wonder what that meant. Like, I'd be thinking about it a little bit more deeply than that. I probably would have asked you. I probably like made it okay for you not to say it. I like, you know what? You don't have to say it. I'm just gonna tell you how I feel because that's the kind of person I am, and I'm just gonna say what I feel. So, and I can understand you're not there yet, and I kind of make decisions when I have them to make, and I can understand other people need to process it. I probably would have gone that route, but different people need different things, and we haven't changed that. You know, ever since growing up. So it's like I know now that even in the beginning of the relationship, you were saying that words of affirmations is your love language. You feel loved when you hear, I love you, right? You feel love when people say, good job, you're doing a good job, you know, words of affirmations. Right. And my thing is personal touch. But the thing is, if I was growing up in that household, I would have been okay without the I love you. Like I don't think I would have went to therapy for that reason, right? I think that for myself with the generational curse thing, like I have adopted parents, right? Oh, I was adopted from my parents. For me, it was more so that I didn't feel like I had guidance through life. And that led me to be thinking about myself a little bit more often. So like I didn't have the guidance of what to do. So then I'd always look at myself like, I don't know what to do. So either I just stay in this position,
I figure it out,
or I use my resources and figure out what I'm supposed to do. And I think that created a spirit in me to drive forward, but then also it created doubt in me. I remember being like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't know if I'm moving in the right direction. And I've made mistakes all along the way of growing up. But I think that that's important to make those kinds of mistakes because that's how people find themselves, right? And it's like we always try to like, okay, let me just succeed and not go through failure. But like it takes a lot of peeling back the onion to really figure out what the actual situation that's going to work for you is. And for anyone that's just going along with what people are telling them to do, they wind up being unhappy at the end of the day. I went to college because, my parents wanted me to go to college. And then like I was unhappy afterwards. And I'm like, okay, what the fuck am I supposed to be doing here? This is not me. This is not, my personality. And there was like a connection issue. So it was like similar to yours. But I didn't view it because I don't think my parents said I love you like that either, to be honest with you. My mom says it more now that I'm an adult. But growing up, I don't believe that was the case. But I never even thought about that, to be honest.
But did they replace that with hugs and kisses and all that?
No, which is funny. Like my mom cooked every day pretty much. And I think I made that the I love you. I think I was like, oh, okay, well, she's making food for us. Like that's great. Like it was like that. I keep thinking about like why is my love language personal touch?
Yeah, normally they say your love language is things that you didn't have as a child. For me, words of affirmation is something I didn't have as a child. Quality time is something I didn't have as a child. So like as an adult, I want that. The idea of like physical touch, it's not anything. For me, it's nice to have physical touch, but it's not when you take the test, it's like, what is your prominent or your predominant love language? And I would prefer someone to like show me that they love me through words or spending time with me.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, you didn't have personal touch either, right?
I didn't have shit. I didn't have personal touch. I didn't have words of affirmation. I didn't have quality. I didn't have any of the love languages.
That's what I mean. Like, but like, what's important is like the association that we have, right?
Right.
You didn't have personal touch, but that wasn't the thing that you're like, oh fuck, like I don't have personal touch. My life is over. It wasn't like that. It was like I don't have words of affirmation. That's what I need.
Right.
Like you selected that. Right. So like for myself, I didn't have words of affirmation. I was almost teetering on being repulsed by words of affirmation. And I think it's because of how I grew up, right? Because like I grew up without my biological parents. So then when people would come to you and be like, oh, like you're doing such a good job, it was almost patronizing, right? So then I looked at that situation like, fuck you, I could do better than that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm better than you, I'm better than both. And that's the mentality I took. So it's like the association I had with words of affirmation is like, no, I don't need that. All I need is myself and to like, move forward.
Yeah, I don't know before this relationship. Actually, you knew from the first time you touched me. It was just like I was
the very first time.
I was super uncomfortable. People touching me or trying to give me hugs made me very uncomfortable.
Yeah, let's just clarify that real quick. Right. It's like the first time you touched me, I was extremely uncomfortable.
Okay,
and people don't usually touch me like that, but
when you put your arm around me,
okay, that's better.
When we were walking outside in public.
You made me sound like Donald Trump, like grab him by the pussy.
Yeah, I was like, all your touches make me uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable for me. And my friends always joke because I'm that person, like, if you want to make me like squeamish, try to reach out for a hug, and that will make me like, ugh.
Yeah, you tell me that, and that's surprising to me every time you say it, because like I remember in the beginning feeling a weird friction or whatever with putting my hand on you, but it was still so like my natural default that I didn't really think twice about it.
Right.
I didn't realize that this was like a lifelong thing that you were trying to get over, right? I didn't know, like obviously it's like the very beginning of our creating a bond, and I didn't recognize that was something that would make somebody feel uncomfortable just in a general sense, right?
Right.
When that happened, you felt the need to have a conversation with me, I remember. I didn't even recognize that was a situation until we had that conversation. it was like a subconscious thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was a little weird. But like, I've also known that when somebody feels uncomfortable, then you back off for a second and then try again. So I think that's exactly what happened. Is like you stiffened up, and I was like, okay, this is weird. And then I like took my hand off, and then later on I would put my hand back on, and then you'd be more accepting of it.
This try again. There's limits to that.
No, there's not.
I don't want people to be like, she said no, and I tried again. Like, no.
Yeah, you just keep trying.
No,
just
babe.
keep trying until you succeed. Fail, and get success. That's all it is.
Oh, man.
But yeah, so your generational curse was merely love language.
Love and
affection.
affection. Showing
Okay.
love and affection. And that's something, like I said, I wanted to work on in this relationship, or even actually I was working on it prior to this relationship. What was yours?
My generational curse, I don't know. I don't think I have one. I don't think my generational curse was, I can't say generational,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I don't know what my family was for generation. I don't know
Right.
what that was.
Right.
So I think the curse that I had was not knowing, not knowing who I was.
Right.
And I think that I know that took me all over the place, just trying to find myself. I always looked at it as a positive though, because I'm figuring myself out early in life. And I think that most people don't get the chance to do that until they're out of college and, they're trying to figure out who they want to be as an adult. But I had to figure that out when I was like in middle school. And it's weird because at the same time that you're figuring yourself out, what I was doing is I was like researching of what successful people are doing. I was trying to figure out things that meant something to me. I remember feeling like, okay, this is something I want. This is something I want. And also being like, am I taking from these people and not actually being myself? And it took a lot of figuring it out to be able to say, I'm happy with where I'm at in life. I'm happy with who I am in life. I am who I am. It took me a while to get to that stage.
I wonder if your generational curse, even though you don't know the previous generations, if it was like the lack of guidance or the lack of role models, like I wonder if that's what your adoptive parents went through as well.
I'm sure. I'm positive that they had a messed up upbringing and that led them to a situation where they couldn't raise, their children.
Right.
And since that was the case, that keeps happening for generations and generations. That's one thing that if you feel that way, it's really detrimental, right? Because it's like, imagine growing up through life and not knowing who you are at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then just being like trying to refer to the things that are around you, like your parents, and being like, they're not me. Like, they're not who I am. And then like, okay, well, who am I? And you're not having an answer. Okay,
Right.
well, what about my background? Not having an answer. That a lot of times I think leads to like suicide and like depression and things like that. So I always felt that like depression or those types of things are like knocking on my door.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that's also why I'm heavy with like taking action,
Mm-hmm.
because I've noticed that if I just sit still, that's where, or I have nothing on my schedule, I sit still, I'm completely out of line with going towards my purpose. And that starts to make me feel like, okay, there's something wrong. I think that's where that stems from. Yeah,
That's interesting.
it is.
I'm trying to think of other generational curses. I think we talked a little bit about, we both had, well, maybe we haven't talked about this, how our financial state was within our households. For me, the finances were taken over by my dad, and my mom knew nothing about anything that was going on in the financial world. And it wasn't until when things like shit hit the fan where she's like, oh, I had no idea this was going on. And even then she did not have the details of it. And I remember being so frustrated by that, because that's not something I wanted within a relationship. Like, I wanted to know what the finances were. I wanted to know what was going on, and to understand like, hey, if the ship is sinking, I want to know that the ship is sinking. I don't want to find out once the ship is at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
But that's something I didn't know how to go about it. Like, I'm grateful that you're pretty open to talking about finances. So that wasn't a conversation that I really needed to sit down and be like, I would like to know what's going on financially within the relationship.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be completely out of it and not know what's happening and just be along for the ride. I want to be an active participant in what's happening.
Yeah, I think one of the positives of researching everything for myself, like researching everything about who I believe myself to be, right? Doing that, you tend to find the best of each of the worlds, basically.
Mhm.
So it's like, I look at relationships, like, how should relationships be? Well, both people should be distributed fairly amongst the relationship. And I think that that's the best practice. Like, it wouldn't necessarily be equal, right?
Mm.
Because equal is like 50-50 everything. And I think men have a specific role, women have a specific role, and they come together, and then we say, like, okay, what's fair between the two, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's a recipe for success. But also with finances, I looked at it that way as well. Finances and just general communication, right?
Mhm.
Because like there hasn't been a time where I just kept things to myself and it made everything around me better.
Mhm.
It's always when I say things out loud, just saying it. It doesn't matter. Well, it does matter how you say it, right? Like that's something I need to work on. But in general, once you say something and you're saying it to the person that needs to hear it, then you can start working out a solution. Then you can start figuring things out. And when we started talking about finance, that's like obviously something that I was passionate about. And I
Mhm.
don't think we talked about it before then. It was like how many months in before we actually started talking about finances. And I think that me researching so much about it, I was good. Like I was at a point where I was like, okay, I got it, figured it out. You know what I mean? And then when you asked me about it, it was just like a light just turned on, and I was like, oh yeah, this is something that I really enjoyed learning about.
Mhm.
So when I was talking with you, it was like nonstop because I was like, this is great. Like da 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 da. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. If we're gonna form our lives together, this is something that we should do beforehand. And again, these are things that I would research.
Right.
Right. You mentioned Dave Ramsey. And then I just was like, oh yeah, definitely listen to Dave Ramsey. Like he's the guy. He's definitely the
Mhm.
guy. But then I also remember a lot of the things that were new to you. And to me, that was a beautiful thing because it's like when you just watch like a really good movie
Mhm.
and you tell your friend about the movie and then they're there watching it with you and then you could see their reaction to all the good parts of the movie. That's what it was like. And I was just like, wow, she's starting to, like, she feels the same thing I felt when I first heard about this. That's pretty amazing to see.
Yeah, I think for me, having those conversations, like you said, it was something that you were really passionate about, and to see your passion and your enthusiasm when you talked about those things was like exciting to me. And also there was like a whole world that I did not know about, right? Like I all I knew is like I needed to pay my bills on time, and that was the extent of it. And like learning just little things, some things I still don't understand to this day. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. But the other parts of it that has really been beneficial, and just like getting myself aligned and having, an accountability partner
Yeah.
has been super helpful.
Yeah, it's nice because I'm one to, like, I love experience, right? Like experience is like the biggest thing for me, but I don't like planning things.
Mm.
And you're more of a planner.
Mhm.
So it's really cool to see you have the experience and then start planning it in your life,
Mhm.
and I'm like, wow, this is just the coolest thing. And it actually encourages me to expose you to different things, like
Mhm.
newer things. And sometimes I think of like, okay, what else can I open your world to,
Mhm.
that you haven't seen before? And I think that is a really good experience for me. So it really works hand in hand.
Mm.
Yeah. But it's interesting because like we're bringing our relationship together and we're seeing where the things actually fit. And I feel like the struggles that we went through, we're able to create positives out of it. But then we're also able to make it fit like a glove when it comes to you and me. What do you think one thing is in our relationship that hasn't fit like a glove? That
That
was like
hasn't.
that was like a lot of friction and that was difficult to, mesh together.
I guess it's our communication style. I think that was probably the most difficult thing for us to work on, or we're still working on it. I guess generational curses or childhood traumas.
I think that's a part of that.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
for me growing up in a household where people yelled all the time, that's how people communicated to each other. It's like the loudest person wins. I hated yelling and I hated
Mm.
people raising their voice, and I just shut down. Like when anyone yells, it's just like you won't that's the end of the conversation for me. You won't hear me say anything else after that.
Mm.
As folks can probably tell, you have elevated voice. So I know like when you get upset, like your voice elevates,
Yeah.
and I would automatically shut down because I equated that to yelling. So I think that has been like the hardest part, the communication styles.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So, yeah.
agree. I think you're 100% dead on with that cuz like it's funny because a big part of my life growing up was football. And football was the number one sport. I didn't want to do anything other than play football for the rest of my life. And I didn't have any plan B. So I was just like, this is what I'm going to do. In football, they yell at you on purpose to motivate you, to light a fire under your ass, right? And again, I didn't have parental guidance. So that was one thing that I took and I was like, yes, yeah, this is for me. And I use that in my career. I use that in my life in general as a thing that gets me going. So like when I would look up successful tips or whatever, I'd always veer towards the people that are yelling. And I was like, this guy gets it, you know? Like he understands completely. And like Dave Ramsey, he's like screaming at people. He's like, you got credit cards. What the f- is wrong with you? And I was like, yes. You know, I don't know what it is, but that's what helps me. So obviously, like when we got into a relationship in the beginning, it was just like, oh, you don't like yelling at all? You're like, what do you mean? Like, this is me. This is what I do. But then also I was like, I did research on that's not a healthy way to be in a relationship if people are screaming at each other. So like I was stuck at a crossroads of who I am and what's best for you and I. And then I had to be like, am I willing to change this?
Right.
Yeah. And that was a difficult decision. And again, I'm at the point where like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to. But then I also look at it like, this is an experience to find a whole new world, a whole new way of handling things.
I agree because it not only does it take effort on your part, but it also takes effort on my part. Because, like I said, my initial reaction to you yelling would be to stop talking and to shut down and to be like, "Well, this is where I stop putting in input just because I don't want to escalate it." And also, that's what I did with my other family members. Like when they yell, I stop talking because then they just walk away. I'm like, oh, problem solved.
Yeah.
So that's how I had been used to dealing with their yelling. I was like, same thing, having a conversation with myself, like, okay, this is how he communicates. Now we're going to have to get to a point where my solution can't be staying silent or just like not communicating during this thing. And also I won't yell back. I just know that's not it within me.
I like that we're both aware of ourselves and what we do, because the truth is I'm not right and you're not right. Right? The right thing is somewhere in the middle. Like I remember, like we've had conversations on both sides of it, right? Where I'm like, hey, I'm saying something that is meaningful to me and my voice is elevated because it's meaningful, you know? And then I'm like, I don't appreciate when you just shut down because I need somebody to spar with, like, you know, it's like that. and then on the other end, you're like, yeah, I don't like being yelled at. I don't like feeling like you're elevating your voice at me. It doesn't make me feel good. So I had to change things. You had to change things. And we're at the point where we're getting through these conversations, these discussions or these arguments or whatever. We're getting through them without having to yell at each other. Right. You know, we're getting through these conversations with being able to see each other's point of view. And I feel the resistance inside of me. You know what I mean? Like I feel myself like, do not get angry to this level. Do not start shouting because it's not worth it. There's no reason for it. And if you do, you're going to wind up apologizing. You know? So it's like, I don't want to have to apologize. So I'm like, just handle it the right way. What are things that you say to yourself? I'm sure internally you feel like shutting down.
Right.
And like, I remember having a conversation with you like, hey, like you still have to play ball. Like we still have to talk.
Right. That honestly is the conversation I have with myself. Is just like, okay, you need to actually engage in this conversation. Because I remember you telling me one time, like, me not saying anything doesn't resolve the issue or make you calm down. It actually elevates it. For me, shutting down or not saying anything had been working for me. Like when my brother yells, when my dad yells, I don't say anything, and eventually they're like, okay, I've said, like, it was almost like a venting session that they needed to do, and I just allowed them to yell. So
Yeah.
for you, you're like, no, I require you to say something back. But one of the reasons why I don't say stuff back is because it will force me to yell, because you're trying to talk over the other person, and then it becomes like a yelling match back and forth. And so I recognize that, like, okay, I just need to stop talking and have the other person say whatever they need to say, because I didn't want to become the yeller of my family. Like, that's how we had communicated, and I was trying to stop communicating that way, or trying to stop having these conversations where we're just yelling back and forth, because that's literally our household was just a whole bunch of people yelling all the time.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I can't imagine it being like that. Like my household wasn't like that, but like everyone was like disconnected. Nobody was lovey-dovey or like, hey, how you doing today? Da-da-da. Like nobody was like that.
Right.
I find myself the most comfortable when I'm isolating myself, you know, and then figuring things out on my own, and then driving forward that way. It's difficult when I'm used to life being like that, and then having a partner that is like, hey, let's have a real relationship. Let's be together on these decisions, these conversations. That's what makes things difficult. But I think that's difficult for everyone. Two people coming from completely different ways of life, coming together and uniting as one is a difficult task for anyone. So yeah, it's interesting that we had those experiences that made it difficult for us, but I enjoy the challenge. In one way, it's like we're creating our own identity together.
Right.
You know, like I've done this once for myself, and now that we're in a relationship, it's like, what is our identity? You know, if we're going to say this is us and that's a united front, what does that look like? So I think that that's a beautiful thing. Like when we're both coming together and say, hey, let's do this. Hey, let's do this. Some of them's your ideas. Some of them's my ideas.
Yeah.
I just think that that's, when you look at it from that perspective, it's like, oh, this isn't hard. This is how it's supposed to be.
Right. I agree. I think watching us grow. The other day I was telling you like how excited I am, or how happy, I don't know what the adjective I use, how happy I was to be able to see us growing, and to see like how we had first started this relationship, and even like the first early months of this relationship, how that has like evolved and we are growing together. And there's definitely been like ups and downs and within our relationship where it really took like just learning each other, and then recognizing there was stuff that we both needed to change in order to make things work.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. No, because like I literally like just today I'm like, wow, I feel like we're in our honeymoon phase.
Yeah.
And like we've been together for over a year now. It's because we're almost like reinventing what it is to be in a relationship.
Right.
Like this is the first time that I have a relationship that works, you know, and then we're like, okay, well, how are we going to build together? And how are we going to maintain happiness of each other for the rest of our lives? How are we going to do that? Yes, it's a daunting task. Yes, it's something that's a big deal. Right. However, it's a great challenge. And I love challenges, but like I also love when you can start seeing the fruits of your labor come together.
Yeah.
Because we're in a completely different phase and we're completely different people now than we were a year ago.
Yeah.
Which is, it's mind blowing.
Definitely. There are so many things that I think I'll talk about my therapist a lot. Shout out to Darlene. But I think she asked me maybe when we were like 3 months or 4 months into our relationship, like, how has this relationship changed me? And she's like, do you see positives? And I was definitely like, there are so many positives. I was positive that I was like the shit before our relationship. I was like, I had my shit together.
Yeah.
But being able to evolve and grow and realize you're never in a place where you're perfect, right? You always have some things that you can definitely, you know, work on and make better. And even the things that I thought I had solidified and I was really good at, I was like, oh my God, I'm even better at this. Like the idea of being able to submit is not I don't like that word. The idea of
submit.
The idea
just submit.
No, of being able to like, let myself go within a relationship was something that I always in my head I was like, I'm never going to be in a point in a relationship. Like I don't even care if I'm married where I'm 100% comfortable with my partner.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a part of me that's going to be like guarded and I feel like needs to be guarded. And then in this relationship, there's rarely a time where, if ever, a time where I feel like I need to be guarded and
Right.
not show like my true authentic self with you.
Yeah, and I think you know that almost like instinctively. When you're in a relationship or when you have to deal with just anyone, you know what you're able to talk to them about, you know what you're not able to talk to them about, and
Right.
instinctively you're like, I can be this vulnerable with this person.
Right.
But it's usually not 100% vulnerable with this person. It's like a safety mechanism, which is good. I think that that's a good thing in general. Our brains are set up so we go to safety, and I think that's one of the things that we do. But when you find somebody that is like they get it, that like they want the same things as you, even when you take in your time, you know, they take their time with you figuring it out together, you start letting things go more and more. There's obviously like scary parts, right? Where you're like, I've never said this to anybody. I've never talked about this with anybody. This is something that I haven't shown anybody. And I just want to say this to you because I believe in us. That's really what it is. And it's scary. But the more that things unravel and the more that you let yourself not be guarded, the more it feels like, okay, it's okay and it's gonna be okay.
Right.
Like things are working. Yeah. I just think that it's hard to find that person.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like when you had your past relationships, I'm sure they weren't as open as this relationship.
Right.
You know, and I'm sure like that also stunts your growth. If I'm not able to be vulnerable and I'm not able to open myself up, then I can't find the third party perspective of something. I can't see anything outside of my own vision about it. I can't tell how many times that you've had thoughts or I've had thoughts that you're like, yeah, well, what about this? I'm like, yeah. And then you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, like that's actually, I didn't think about it that way, but that helps. So that's like a really cool thing.
Yeah, I remember the first time I told you about my anxiety. I've always gotten a weird reaction from people when I tell people about my anxiety disorder. Like I'll either get the get over it reaction or I get people like babying me, like being like walking on eggshells almost. And I'm just like, I didn't say I have an intellectual disability. Like I can function in life.
I can fuck shit up if I want to.
And
just gotta make the decision.
But your reaction to it, I remember like that allowed me to see you as my safe space because how you reacted to it was like, my response was like, oh, that's a different perspective because I had never gotten that before. Like even from my therapist, I hadn't received that type of reaction before. And it made me view my anxiety disorder in a whole different light than I had. Because I considered that like my number one weakness. And I was like, shit, now I have to tell him I have this anxiety disorder. And this could either end extremely badly or like this, I don't know. But your reaction to it
what was my reaction?
So when I told you I had an anxiety disorder, you asked me like, how does that look like on your day-to-day basis? And I described going out, what I have to prepare myself for mentally. And you're like, wow, you're super brave. And I was like, no, like this is my weakness. What did you not understand about everything I just said? Like this is the weak spot of me. This does not make me brave. And you're like, no, even though you go through all of this emotion, you're still able to like function and be successful and do all these other things. And I was like, oh, I guess so.
That shit is crazy to me. Like, let's say like it's a fat person, right? And they just love eating food. And then they're like, hey, you should actually not eat food and you should work out and you know, become a power lifter. You know, and it's against all odds. No matter what, you're like, all right, I'm game. Let's do it. It's like, that's a horrible analogy. However,
no fat shaming here.
I mean, it's okay to be fat. I'm just saying, like, this is a situation. But yeah, like I look at that situation because it's like, I think of my anger, right? Like my anger is blinding. And when I'm angry, like I'm not disrespectful, thank God, but I am. I am because like I say things in like a very rude way, but I say exactly what I want to say, but I don't like call anybody out their name, right? So me doing that and just thinking about just changing that on a dime, Yeah, that's not happening without years and years of therapy and help and like a support system and all the things that I need to be able to help me be successful with that. But for yourself, you experience anxiety and you're like, I hate this part about myself. This is something that I'm dealing with that it's hard for me to function in life because of, but you still look at these things like, I am me and I'm more powerful than my anxiety, you know, and I'm a powerful woman and I can do these things even though I have anxiety. Like at the time, you know, you got your doctorate's degree, you do like speeches, you know, in your Zoom calls at work, and you go to social gatherings, and it's like you wouldn't even know that that's something that you are battling. And I'm just like, wow, somebody this is something that is a extreme difficult for me, and it actually makes me feel vulnerable and ashamed and things like that. And for you to handle it so elegantly, I was just like, this is like a superhero right here. Like, this is crazy. It's like, seriously, like I can't understand how difficult it has to be for you to be able to do that initially, right? Like now this is like what you do. In the beginning, it was not like that for sure. And I think that what also helps me, like what helped me at the time when I responded to that was because of my upbringing. People found out that I was adopted and they're like, oh, and then they're extra nice. And I'm just like, look, bitch. Like, you know what I mean? It's like the worst thing you could do when somebody knows something about you that you don't care for them to know. Yeah. So then at that point, I made a decision to never baby anybody. I don't care. We've gotten in like conversations where like you would start crying and I'm just like, okay, well, I mean, that's not going to make me feeling differently about how I feel right now. So I'll wait, but like, it's not to be an asshole, but like, I feel like you're being an asshole when you're just like, oh, it's okay. And you're like patronizing the person. That's crazy. So I think that's one thing that I like got right in the relationship, and everything is room for improvements. But yeah, I think this was a great episode. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, we have conversations like this all the time, but
yes, me too. So if you think that you like this episode as well, please remember to like and subscribe to our podcast. So next time we come out with something, you'll be the first to know. And remember to love God, family, and yourself always. And in all ways, take care.